There are thousands of scientists, engineers, technicians, and even bystanders that have died doing laboratory research and chemical manufacturing. Over 1,000 of those deaths are in the USA alone, costing an estimated $39 million.
It was a horrific tragedy. And it was a landmark case where the faculty member actually was found to be liable. It's easy to just say, well, I'm being safe. It's not going to happen to me.
So how do I know this? Well, there's a database that has been tracking over 2,600 different safety incidents, and you should be uploading your close calls so that other researchers can learn from them too.
What we know is that 2,700 students annually go to the emergency room.
So how do we use it, and how do we learn from it? Well, I'm Derek Miller, the founder of Genius Lab Gear, and I'm here with Dr. Stephen Taylor, the executive director of the Laboratory Safety Institute. So, Stephen, LSI has been cataloging incidents from close calls to injuries and even deaths going back to the 1700s, using that info to provide training and resources to scientists and engineers to hopefully prevent new ones, if anyone is listening. So now we don't want to scare people out of doing lab work. That's not like our intention here, but they should understand that the worst case scenarios are pretty bad and they need to take it seriously, right, to prevent them. So can you tell us about maybe 3 of these incidents that come to mind that were probably preventable and what those researchers could have been doing differently along the way?
You know, it's interesting when you talk about preventable, because preventable, there's a lot that goes into that. We actually just released a new model that we are using to help people uncover holes in their systems, and it's actually through this thing called the Swiss cheese model. But the basic idea is that you have your people, you have your processes, and you have the practices within your lab, within your organization. And when there are holes that exist in any of those 3 and they line up, all of a sudden you run into a risk that an incident or that a hazard can turn into a risk, can turn into an actual accident within your space. And so we talk about trying to fill those and make sure that our systems are resilient to the situations that could be present. So, you know, talking about one that most people know about is the Sherry Sanji case, which is really, was first off, it was a horrific tragedy. And it was a landmark case where the faculty member actually was found to be liable and was criminally
Wow.
charged for the death of Sherry Sanji. And one of the big reasons why he was criminally charged is that she was not a student. She wasn't a student. She wasn't a grad student. I'm pretty sure that she was actually a hired research assistant. And that becomes, you start falling into different categories of your responsibility when you are an employer versus an educational institution only. And so that made that case a little bit interesting and really brought OSHA to the forefront in that investigation. So just taking a step back as far as like what happened in the horrific Sherry Sanji case is that she was a um, she was a research assistant working in the lab, working with terbutylithium. And she was using terbutylithium with a plastic syringe, which is known to, those are known that you can lose suction on those pretty easily. And so she was withdrawing a large amount of butyllithium and the plunger pulled out. And
Okay.
all the butyllithium came onto her and immediately ignited. But when we talk about preventability, so one, she was not trained, so you didn't have the right training for her. But then in the second layer is the PPE. She didn't have a lab coat on. She was wearing her clothes caught fire, and then she had nothing between her and the materials that's going to cause burns. So when we think about like, was it preventable? Yeah. You know, in a lot of ways it's preventable. But probably the biggest thing is if she had on a lab coat, she would have had something that she could have taken off that was actually protecting her from the chemical from the fire, that she could have gotten off before she got so severely burned that she passed.
Wow. Yeah, I heard about that one. I think that was a big wake up call for academic research institutions in the US because safety in academic labs is just known to be a lot more lax, loose, a little bit more cavalier. And that one is like, wow, this can actually happen. And all it takes is something so small as a syringe mistake, right? Choosing
Yep.
the wrong syringe at the wrong time. And
Absolutely.
yeah, like you said, that was step one. That could have prevented the fire. Even with the fire, anything over top, an apron, a lab coat, as long as you can get it off quickly, a flame retardant lab coat would have been the best case there. But even a cotton or polyester one, if they could get it off very quickly, polyester can melt. But I see a lot of people have the plastic buttons, which you have to unthread. Do you know how long those take off? Those metal snaps, if you can just rip those off very quickly, at least that buys you 5 seconds before it gets through the lab coat onto your skin.
And
And
sometimes
that
that's all
might
you
be
need.
enough to, yeah, you might still have a small injury, but she might be alive even with a regular old lab coat.
Yeah, absolutely. So that to me is like one of the, one of the biggest cases, like when people say, I don't need my lab safety glasses. I don't need my lab coat. We take when the incidents haven't like really hit us in the face. It's
Hmm.
easy to just say, well, I'm being safe. It's not going to happen to me. But the line you know, between a near miss and an incident is so razor thin.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I monitor Reddit, and I'm sure you do too. Some of the stories that come out on there are really scary. People's close calls that come up all the time. Um,
Absolutely. And there's no way to track them, right? I mean, there's no database, and there's actually no good database when it comes to lab incidents in general, or science incidents. I mean, they're the incidents that people report, and a lot of times many of these things get missed. And it makes it hard for you to be able to go back, look at historical data, see where the issues actually what are causing the issues and how can we do a better job.
Mhm. Yeah, and I like the visualization of the Swiss cheese model because you can get away with a lot of holes for a long time in a lab until, like you said, just two or three of them line up, and that safety check is no longer there, and then something is a disaster all of a sudden. And in this case, I like to say that the best lab coat is the one that you actually want to wear
Yeah.
because that can make so much of a difference. That's step one. Of course, there's better lab coats and worse lab coats after that, but if you just get one you like wearing, you'll throw it on for that simple little thing that you're doing, and that might be what protects you from what some other student's doing next to you that you
Yep.
have nothing to do with.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll tell you another story. So that's near and dear to my heart because it's my story. And this you won't find this in the news, and you won't find this in,
Let's hear
anywhere.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, unless you hear me give a presentation or something. And it was one that happened to me in graduate school because let's let's face it, a lot of times as graduate students, we can be academically smart, but we don't always practice what we're told, and we aren't always told what we need to be told
Hmm.
to make smart decisions. So I had a story when I guess I was in my third year of graduate school, and I was working on this really cool project, a very simple project, but really cool. I worked on vapor chromic materials. And so these were materials that would change colors in the presence of organic vapors. And in this case, it was actually in the presence of water. So you can use it as a humidity sensor, and
Hmm.
there's some different applications to it. And it was cool because these were platinum compounds. They were square planar and they would stack in the solid state. And basically, when you put into a solvent, they had these channels, and it would move the stacks around. And as they
Oh,
got
okay.
more aligned, they would turn red. And if they were less aligned, they were yellow. And it was just this cool project. But the compound I was working on, these were salts, and it was a perchlorate salt. And I worked on these perchlorate salts for a couple years, never had an issue. And that's always the hallmark that you're set up for a bad situation is when you say that I've never had a problem with it.
Hmm.
And I was working late at night. It was not a perchlorate salt. It was actually a chloride salt because I was looking at the way that the hydrogen bonding would stack in the channels. And I was, like I said, alone at night, and I was rotovapping this compound down. I'd actually, for some reason, had a very fortuitous decision, I think, was I switched from a small neck round bottom flask to a large neck round bottom flask. I then was scraping it out with a metal spatula, and it sparked and exploded in my hand. And I remember
Jeez.
white knuckling the flask. And I looked down at my hand like I was not hurt. It went off like a shotgun, but it was like, "My hand's here?" The flask is here, it's completely black, and I set it down and I left. And so I went home, and I remember coming back and that flask sat on my bench until I graduated. But
As a reminder.
it was my
Yeah.
reminder that, you know, all these assumptions that we can make around safety, I mean, things can just go south so quick, and I was lucky to walk away with my hand.
Yeah, and by the nature of research, a lot of times you don't know what is going to happen with the things you're mixing, right? That's the
Right.
whole point of doing it. And I've seen in the database some stories from the 1700s, 1800s of people working with things, trying to isolate things. And then when they do it, they have no idea what to expect. And it's just going to keep, the more we know now, is better and better, but there's always going to be new things, new compounds, new reactions that we're constantly pushing the boundaries of that we're not going to know how they behave until we make them. And then we have to find out the hard way. And so you just need to be prepared for anything. Do you think that more labs should have these reminder, type relics scattered around the lab, maybe some posters like on cigarettes to scare people about what could happen?
Which is really funny. You go overseas, we were over in the Middle East, and the sign on the cigarettes was, like, gigantic. We got this real little sign, there's, like, boom. Probably the best thing that one can do is to actually share stories like this, because what becomes happens, so say if you have your group meetings and you start off your group meeting and you're sharing a lab safety story. All of a sudden, you're not hearing something like about a person like a Sherry Sanji, who you don't know. And it's a terrible case, but you don't know them. But if we're talking about Jim, who I've been in grad school with for the past 4 years, and he tells a story about how he was almost hurt or something went south in the lab, all of a sudden it's a lot more relatable because you know what he's working on, you know what happened, and you could see it. And all of a sudden you can see yourself in that situation. So the more relatable things are, so being able to share stories and lessons learned in your group meetings, I think is a really powerful way to help encourage new, better behaviors.
I think that's a really good practice. We never had that in grad school. Do you see a lot of groups doing that right now? Is that becoming a standard practice?
So I wouldn't say in grad school necessarily, but I saw it in industry.
Okay.
So we started when I was in industry and R&D at Shepherd, we did a program called Safe Start. And there was this, basically they had a certain way that they would share their stories. And there was a set of very common, like what would what we call it? There was critical error reduction techniques, and there were common states of what would cause the incident. A lot of it was I balance traction slipping. Another one was your eyes on task, minds on task, so you weren't paying attention. So there was these states that would cause the error, and then here's these sets of things that we can do to help reduce the error in the future. And when we told the stories like that, and you heard it in the plant, and you heard it in your all team meetings, and you heard it in your group meetings, and the more that it like the more that the stories were shared, the more that people seemed to really buy in. And they
Hmm.
weren't just sharing stories about what happened at work, because a lot less incidents happen at work. It was more like I nearly tripped over the grill because I was talking with Johnny and I didn't realize that there was a cord. And so now I fixed that issue. So it was a way to bring it home as
I
well.
love that. Yeah, I think I will start sharing that more often with our audience as well. I think that's a practice that when I worked in industry, it was the same. If there was a big accident, mistake, it may not safety wise, but if somebody cost a lot of money, really like flubbed some big project, they had to write a document, a report on what happened, why it went wrong, how they can prevent it in the future. And it's really to establish the root cause. Was it just a user error? Was it a training thing? Or is there like something systemically wrong with the entire operation that needs fixed? Like the Swiss cheese model you were talking about. So if we can do that with safety and just make that a part of the group meeting, when it's someone's turn to share, they share one thing that they thought could be improved, or something, or a close call, or something that they fixed, something that they improved themselves. I think that's a great way to do it, just little by little and ingrain it in the culture.
Absolutely. Well, and you think of the outcomes of this. So we look at incidents, we look at lab incidents, but the biggest ones are your industrial incidents. And those
Hmm.
things could be gigantic. But a lot of it is traced back to the lab and little observations. You know, that little exotherm in your reaction could be your reaction actually boiling out of the tank on the production scale. And being aware of the connection between the two is really important. And so once again, sharing those insights become really important to anything that goes to scale up in industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you have a lot of experience in this. What can you give us maybe a 30-second background of what you did in grad school, what your relationship is with the safety field in general, and how you got into your job right now?
Yeah. So I've had a very winding road in my career. So I'm a PhD chemist by training. I went to University of Cincinnati, studied vapor chromic materials. At my heart, I'm a problem solver. I like to solve problems and I like to basically find data in order to solve those problems. So it's always been going back and doing research. But
Hmm.
I moved on from my PhD and did my postdoc at Purdue University with John Wilker, focused on um, marine biology. How do
Really?
oysters stick to surfaces underwater? And it
Okay.
was
Okay.
super fascinating,
Yeah.
and we had these huge oyster tanks and mussel tanks in our chemistry lab. It was a blast.
Did you ever steal any for dinner, or is that forbidden?
Ooh, you know, it took me about 5 years to be able to eat oysters again after postdoc, because that smell will it stays with you.
Oh, it stays with you. It gets into your lab coat, I'm sure.
So moving on from that, was in industry for about a decade as a technical manager, but then probably the most related to safety, which is kinda odd, and what I feel like I'm bringing to LSI is that I went and worked at Untold Content for about 5 years. And while at Untold Content, we really focused on this concept of innovation storytelling and how do innovators talk and how do they share insights in order to solve problems. And that is what really, when I came over to LSI and learned more about the lab safety environment, it was a realization of there's a dearth of data. There's a lack of data in what we were doing, and we do so much. We share so much anecdotally, once again, the
Hmm.
storytelling, but the anecdotes are only as powerful as the data that you can combine with it. Yes, here's this powerful story, and here's the likelihood because we have things that, that we can trace back. And so coming into LSI, I really wanted to get a better grasp on the data and what is the real scope of lab safety incidents around the US and in K-12 and around the world. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, you've been doing a great job sharing it. I would encourage everybody watching to check out Steven's LinkedIn and the LSI LinkedIn. There are a lot of good stories, a lot of good data there, and that's a good network to, instead of sending an Instagram post to, your boss, it's a good one to send a LinkedIn post to your supervisor, and that's probably going to be better received when something comes up that's relevant to your work.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got one more story that Steven's going to share, and then I'll ask some rapid fire questions. But before we do the final story, I want to make sure everybody understands how many resources are available on the LSI website, most of which are free, and a lot of them can contribute to your professional development. So, Steven, what should somebody watching, if they are a little trepidatious, they don't really love their safety situation in their lab right now, what could they find on LSI's website that they might think is useful?
Absolutely. A couple of things. One is that we have a whole set of resources that are available, like posters, databases that you can get access to. You can actually
And the
just
posters are great too.
Yeah, you can just email us directly. We have contact forms on there. We are a nonprofit, so we're always looking to engage and provide the best resources that we can, no matter what the situation. So resources, there are a ton that are available online on our resources tab. So just look at the top and you should be able to find a whole sort of different things. But what LSI is really known for is our courses. Interest in taking a course, please contact me. I'd love to get you enrolled in one of our courses. But the what really, in our courses and what makes our courses so unique is that it's not just a video. You can take our asynchronous courses, but you're going to take a course from me. You're going to take a course from Jim Kaufman, Elizabeth Brown, who's our director of educational content and learning. You're going to talk with a whole set of LSI instructors that you can ask your direct questions to during the course, as opposed to, you're going to sit there, consume content in a video, and then walk away. Because what we want people to walk away from our courses with is an action list. We want you to walk away with things that you can go back and apply in your lab. So check
Mm.
out the courses, but definitely check out the databases as well.
Yeah, and I love the idea of just having a, say, call it a neutral third party that if you ever feel like you don't have the support that you need where you're at, you have somebody else that can come in and comment on are who's right, who's wrong. But there's no black and white here, but it's a matter of like, are your standards up to the bar that's expected in this field? And it's nice to just have that like extra person there if your institution otherwise doesn't have it for you. So yeah, so tons of great resources on the website. I've seen them myself, downloaded most of the poster things also. Stephen, can you share one more story, one more safety story for us?
Yeah, so I guess the last one that I'll mention. So we did one of the big questions that I had when I came in was around lab safety within K-12. And what I now realize is that it's not just about lab safety within K-12 classrooms. Community college, small colleges kind of fit in the same group because they deal with the same challenges, but really around science safety. Because when we talk about lab safety, what we are doing is that we're defining a space. But what becomes a challenge is that, well, what if you're not in a lab? What if you're in a classroom? What if you're in a kitchen? What if you're in what if you're outside? So we talk about it more from the standpoint of science safety when it comes to K-12 and these groups, and we'll show this database in our second, but we have a whole set of these what went wrong cards, and these are from something called the National Electronic Injury Surveillance System. And what these what went wrong cards are is that these are incidents that actually happened to someone in a K-12 classroom or in out in the field with students where a student ended up going to the emergency room. And so we have this database of all of these incidents that we've now collected and analyzed, and we have stories from them, which are really interesting to see not just like what are the worst case scenarios, but also what's the most likely situation to actually occur. And one of the things that we've talked about a lot is the types of demos that we do with our students in our classes. Our teachers are faced with a situation where they are having to entertain as much as they are having to educate. And one of the experiments that teachers still do, despite people having plenty of data saying how hazardous this thing could be if it goes wrong, is the Whoosh bottle. In the Whoosh bottle where they put the ethanol or isopropanol in the big jug and they
Big old
swirl
thing.
it, dump it, and light it. It's a fantastic experiment. But if you don't have standard protocols on how you do that and how you keep people safe, it could be disastrous. And I saw two incidents in the last year where one, nothing happened. And thankfully, and everything was good, but what could have gone wrong? And another one where something did go wrong and people ended up going to the emergency room. But there was a school outside of Indianapolis that did the Whoosh bottle, and the teacher made a very grave mistake because they used a glass bottle instead of the cardboard.
Plastic.
Yeah. And so the plastic gives you a lot more energy to, flexibility to absorb the energy. The glass bottle didn't, and it ruptured. And it sent some glass shrapnel, and it cut the teacher, cut a couple students, and they had to go in the emergency room. No one was killed, but man, that's a close call.
Hmm.
Just to walk away with some stitches. I mean, that's a horrible situation, but it could have been a lot worse.
And you wouldn't even think that that would, if someone teaches you the wish bottle experiment and you use a plastic one and you do it a few times and you feel very comfortable with it, and then you think, oh gosh, I left my plastic one at home, but this glass one's about the same size and glass is stronger than plastic,
That's right.
right? So it should be fine.
But it doesn't take into account all the failure modes.
Exactly. You have to be an expert in materials to really like think about that.
That's right. And so that becomes part of the problem is that you can go watch these things on YouTube and say, hey, I can go replicate this. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where you're making assumptions. You think you're making decisions, but you're really making assumptions, and it winds up in a bad situation for you and the students. And so there's another story, and I make a lot of assumptions about this, but I have commented on it a couple times. But it was a person who does these community activities that was doing the Whoosh bottle, and they had this great picture and it was all the kids lined up. They had a shield in front of the Whoosh bottle. So they had it all set up exactly correct, except the person who was doing the instructing had a student behind the shield without glasses and a big baggy sweatshirt lighting the bottle. And nothing happened. The most likely thing is that nothing's going to happen. It's going to go exactly as planned. But man, if they were in a situation like the glass bottle, it could have been devastating.
Mhm.
So that to me is like when we pick our demos and we pick our activities that we're doing with our students, are we talking through basic hazard analysis to make sure that people are we wearing the right PPE? Do we have the protective measures that we need? What are the hazards? What are the risks? Like, are we setting ourselves up for success from that standpoint to make sure that we mitigate as much as we can
Yeah, that's scary, and like you said, it's probably fine until it's not
until
all of
it's
a
not?
sudden, and a few videos where it's fine and other people see that, and then it just propagates and propagates, and then eventually somebody down the line that doesn't really understand it eventually gets hurt.
There
Fortunately,
was
that person got away with it, at the time. Would you take a few minutes and pull up that incident database to show us, like, kind of, just give people an idea of what they would find there? Because I spent, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes poking through it, and there is some wild stuff in there. And while Steven's pulling that up, I also want to mention on the website, along with the incident database, is a memorial wall, which is a photo and a small bio of every person that's been killed that we know of in research and I think a lot of chemical manufacturing for safety related reasons, all the way back to I think the 1700s. So the memorial wall is a good place to go and look. Like this does happen. A lot of it is in countries that have less developed safety standards than the United States does. But there are a lot of deaths and tons of injuries in the United States to this day. So no one is immune from that.
absolutely. But we went through newspapers.com and we did keyword searching. And we looked all the way back as far as the records would take us back through newspapers.com and looked up explosions and keywords related to science related incidents. And so we have this list now of about 2,700 total incidents going back to the 1700s. And this number of
That
total
is crazy.
cost is not real. I mean, this is just what we could find that was reported in the newspapers
Hmm.
or in the articles that we can find.
It seems like it's probably much higher than that when you
Yeah,
get to lawsuits and updated safety standards and all the extra things that are put into place after. 19,000 deaths is a huge number. I think when somebody opens that up, they're going to see that and be like, "Oh my gosh." Um, I would say uh, you have to use the filters to really see what's going on here because a lot of that is um, industrial manufacturing. They are building wide explosions. That is not the number of academic research deaths by far, but that's not to say there are still quite a few of those. So what would it look like if someone wanted to see, say, academic research, critical injuries and deaths in the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years in the United States?
absolutely. So we can go through, filter it down by country. I've already filtered it down to the 2020s. We can go in here and pick out which area we want to look at. So, say colleges, universities.
Hmm.
And so we can get a picture of just the overall incidents, but this is across the world. So I was looking at this earlier. I don't think that there have been any fatalities since 2000 in the US, but that doesn't mean that there have not been fatalities in colleges, universities, and a couple that have occurred over in like Beijing, China back in 2021. Um, and they've actually had a couple over in China that's caused them to stop and relook at their policies and procedures when it comes to lab safety and what they're doing. So this is not just a US issue. This is a world issue. People, and it's almost at times like whack-a-mole because you just don't know where it's going to pop up. And so we have feeds where we're looking for it every day we have something new come in. So it's a little hard to quantify here, but let me show you where we are getting some more quantitative data that is more reliable as far as like what is the picture. As I mentioned, that whole National Electronic Injury Surveillance System, this is what the US government, the Consumer Product Commission uses for determining product recalls. And so they have a partnership with 100 emergency rooms across the country that are statistically distributed so that they can use the data to get an extrapolation to what is the incident rate across the US.
Mm,
In that data, they have the doctor's notes,
I see.
but it's redacted, right? So
Yeah.
you can go through it and analyze it. But what we can tell from a K 12 standpoint, and we're expanding this into colleges, community colleges, but there's some issues as to why we won't see everything that we do on K 12. But what we know is that 2,700 students annually go to the emergency room in a from a incident that occurs in a K 12 classroom related to science, STEM, STEAM. So
That's a huge number.
it's a big number, and so most of it's some of it has fire involved or explosions, and there's a good number that actually don't just go to the ER, but actually get admitted into the into the hospital. And so we can look at this as a rolling average. We even see the COVID dip. And so we,
When they're not in classrooms, so it's good data.
that's right. And so we expect this to, come back up over the next year. Why did you get clicked? Um, but we can start looking at classes. And one of the most interesting pieces of data is, chemistry is at the top, not shocking, but art is next. And most people say,
Yeah, I
well, why
guess.
art? And I'll tell you. Um, because art is the most likely place that you're going to run into a box cutter or into an X-Acto knife or some type of sharp.
A wheel or a lathe or something spinning quickly or
Yep. And so lacerations are a third overall of all of the incidents. People having to go to the emergency room to get stitches. If schools had a better sharps program, you could eliminate a third of the incidents just by taking that proactive approach. But you talked about like incidents and what's getting hurt and everything. So we've looked at that, and so we can tell you age. Most likely is 15 because that's where they take chemistry. It knows no gender. These injuries are not like boys are too wild and careless because it's
yes.
51% male and 49% female as far as the breakdown. And where are you going to get hurt? It's going to be so. This is like exposure, where it's like your full body's like you're being exposed to a chemical. But it's gonna be your fingers, your eyeballs, your hands, face, head, trunk. But it's going to be, those are the areas that we need to really protect because that's what's going to be in most line of fire for our students.
So is this whole thing is available for the public to poke through?
Absolutely. And not only is it available to the public, um, you can actually get to it.
I can put the link in the description below the video.
So if you go to the bottom of it, you can actually pull it up on Tableau Public because that's where everything's built. And there you can get access
Oh,
to the
okay,
raw
perfect.
data.
So then you can explore it a little bit more.
So we wanted to make sure that yeah, you can
Awesome.
dive into your heart's content whenever this pulls up.
Okay, we'll make sure we include the link to that in the description below. Awesome. Yeah, I haven't seen that one, so I'll go play with it. Before we finish, I want to ask maybe 5 or 6 rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
Sure, let's go.
All right.
Yep.
So here's a question I've seen on Reddit a bunch of times on the Lab Rats Reddit. I want to get your take on it. So let's say someone moves to a new lab and they find that their safety practices are inadequate compared to their last lab. And a lot of times they speak up about it and they often get ridiculed by their other coworkers, sometimes even their advisor saying, no, it's fine. We don't need any extra precautions. We've been doing it this way for a long time. What should they do in that situation?
If you feel uncomfortable in the environment in which you're working, you need to go talk to the person or the group that is responsible for safety within that setting, regardless of what your advisor is directly telling you. Usually you want to bring them with you. But what's most important is that you feel comfortable and you feel safe in the environment that you're being asked to work within. And you need to make sure that you're getting training. A lot of students, so we talk about graduate students, A lot of times they're not getting the training that they need. They get a static video, but there's not anything that really goes through the training that the faculty member, as the subject matter expert, is supposed to like bring you, yeah, to provide to you. And they are supposed to provide you with subject matter safety training in relation to the project that you are doing. And I think one way that graduate student experience and preparedness for the workforce would actually be improved is if the graduate students were required to do a full safety analysis, hazard risk analysis on their graduate projects. Because a lot of
Yeah,
times that's done by the faculty.
I totally agree. In the faculty or maybe in the lab a couple times a month in a lot of cases. So they don't always know what everybody's getting into.
That's right. So to me, that's a gap at a lot of graduate schools, and it would take some effort. But man, as far as preparing for like industry, you can get a better preparation for industry than doing a hazard risk analysis.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so here's something that's happened to me before. So one day you're in a new lab, you're learning, you've got a few senior, lab members teaching you some things. Next thing you know, they've all graduated, they're all gone, and you get in charge. You get put in charge of safety, and then you feel like, wait, I wasn't ready for this. I didn't ask for this. I don't even know if I can enforce everything that well. Like what should someone do in that situation when they are all of a sudden put in charge of safety, and they didn't feel like they had the training from the safety people in the first place to really be qualified for that?
Man, isn't that how it happens at times? You're just you're voluntold
Hmm.
that whole turnover thing. So, what my recommendation in there is, and I've learned a lot about this now being at LSI for 2 years, is that you are supposed to have a whole set of documentation that's associated with your lab and within your department. You need to go and ask. So if you're in charge of safety, what does that mean? And who do I need to ask in order to understand what that means and what am I actually responsible for? What you will find as you go through that process is you'll learn about your chemical hygiene plan as a document that is existing in your department. A lot of times they may not be up to date, which would be a good thing for you to go and potentially work on. But it's really understanding what are the systems in place and what are the mechanisms in place that you are in charge of within your lab. Your lab, if we're talking about just a lab, you are in charge of safety within your lab. It exists within a full system where a lot of processes are all in place to understand those processes and how to leverage them for your own lab.
And I would say update them too, right? Like that's the thing. Did anybody update them in the last 5 years with all those new projects that we started?
That's right. That's right. Well, and a lot of times you'll get faculty, people aren't trying to be avoiding responsibility. People are just busy. Faculty members are busy. I mean, everyone's trying to do a whole lot. But if you come in as someone, you get put in charge of safety, one of the best things that you can do is say, "Hey, you know, faculty member, I know that we need to get this updated. Let me help take the lead on it." And then we can work it back and forth. Because then you're helping them advance their safety program and you're also gaining a whole new skill set that is completely transferable to your next role.
Yeah, I think that's a great stepping stone. It's good to lean into it and make the most out of it while you're in charge of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, another thing that's happened to me. You find a bottle of chemicals in the back of a cabinet, but the label is completely faded, so you can't identify it anymore. What should you do in that case?
You need to know what the chemical disposal process is within your department. Most likely going to talk to the stockroom and get it out of your lab as quickly as you can. But that doesn't mean you moving it, because depending on what it is, it could be you could be dealing with a really explosive situation. I've seen a couple times over the last year where people have been removing crystallized bottles of diethyl ether. And so there you get some peroxides and then you're having a whole new party. We actually had at a K-12 school, someone sent us a picture of a bottle of diethyl ether from the 1980s and they said, "Should we move it?" And we said, "No, you need to contact the right authorities to come and remove it." We also found a bottle of crystallized nitric acid And you would say, well, how does nitric acid crystallize? Well, it doesn't crystallize very easily and it doesn't crystallize at room temperature. But what it will do is if you have it near any bottles of ammonia, it'll make ammonium nitrate crystals. And then you have nitric acid in a mixture, you have ammonium nitrate with nitric acid. And if you have any buildup of organic vapors in a stock room, now you have fuel oxidizer. And so that was at another K-12 school.
All the ingredients for a little bomb
Yeah.
right there.
So, yeah, if you see something that just doesn't look right, you need to talk to someone. And this goes back to having a chemical inventory that is up to date.
If I think it's the thing people might run into is who is that someone? If I'm at a high school and I'm the chemistry teacher, I'm the someone, right? Like, is
Yeah.
there a professional service that comes in with like a bomb squad and like a steel container to put this thing in and take it away?
Good.
Where do you go from there?
Yeah. So usually you would talk to your waste hauler and you would say, here's the situation I'm dealing with. Can you all handle this situation? They would say yay or nay. And if it warrants it, you would call in the bomb squad and they would come out and detonate it. Now, a lot of times the things are not, they're found not to be explosive. We had one just a few months ago that we recommend calling in the bomb squad and they tested it and they said it's not going to detonate. So we said, okay. So there are tests that that groups can do to help determine, but you need to understand who your waste hauler is, their processes for evaluating what they can handle, what they can't, and then who is the step above that. And usually whoever provides your safety training annually will be the right group to go and talk to because they'll have that information. And it should be in your chemical hygiene plan.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Here's a question submitted by one of our Instagram followers. And I personally know that this has been just full of misconceptions and it's a really tricky one, but how do you choose the right type of gloves for your lab work?
Yeah. So you want to go to your glove manufacturer because usually they will have a set. They'll usually have a chart that shows glove compatibility, and that's what you want to use when you're picking out what gloves you need to use, what PPE you need to use. Is that you need a compatibility chart, and it should be plastered on your lab wall that you can just go and look.
Definitely. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is sometimes you need multiple types of gloves for your work. One glove does not fit all
That's right.
in a way. Um, okay, awesome. Thank you. So we've got three more rapid fire questions, but I want those watching to go into the comments right now and put down one question you have that you would like us to answer in our next video. And pause it, comment, and then come back here, and then we'll have three more questions for you really quick. Okay, so Stephen, what is the most common cause of critical injuries or deaths even in academic research labs?
Humans.
Humans.
It's every incident is so different, mostly because all of the failure modes are so situation dependent. But what I would say is probably the biggest cause is a lack of good safety systems and the willingness to follow them. And that's why we always talk about people, policies, and practices. What are the policies that are in place? What are the practices? How do people actually do their work? And are they aligned? And then how do people feel about it? Because a lot of times the way that they feel frustrated, that's all going to impact their behaviors. But it's human behavior is going to be most of the time what causes the issues inside your labs. And so if you go back and look at those policies, practices, and interview your people and like make sure they're feeling good about what's in place for them, you can circumvent a lot of the issues that you could face.
Yeah, you can have the perfect process, and if nobody follows it, it's not worth anything. So, how many lab safety incidents have you tracked in the USA since, let's say, 2020? And I know a lot of the most serious ones are in like either industrial manufacturing, big plants, facilities. But if we exclude those, how many deaths have there been in research?
So I talked about how, within the US, we haven't really seen a fatality. We've seen some major incidents, but not a fatality, at least in my data set. But the probably most official study actually came out of the Chemical Safety and Review Board. So let me pull that up real quick because that is a good one for everyone to have access to. That's not it. So this was a question that people had was around how what's the state of the issue, and what I can tell you after talking with the Chemical Safety Review Board is that um, their this database that they used is not complete. This is just the data that they had. But they tracked incidents from 2001 to 2018, and what they found is that there was 145 incidents that occurred in colleges and universities. There were 66 incidents that occurred in high schools and middle schools, and those resulted in 490 injuries and 10 fatalities. And so that's probably the most official data point. And you can go for a couple of years not have any fatalities that occur, and then you could have a string of them. And there's no consistent pattern that I have seen thus far. It's just more they occur, they occur sporadically, and they occur. Um, there's no geographic um, barrier. They can occur anywhere.
Oh, so yeah, 25 years, 490 incidents, and 10 deaths. So it's almost a death every other year, which is surprising.
So 17 years. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, 17 years, not 25. Well, yeah, a death every other year. Um, luckily. So if someone experiences a close call or an injury in their own lab, how can they add that to your database? And should they ask permission from a supervisor before doing that?
So within our database, everything is anonymous. You don't have to include your name, and you can be vague on, your university. It's a public database that's freely available, and all you would need to do is actually on the page on the website, there's a form that you can fill out to add in your incident. But regardless, if you have an incident or you have a near miss, you need to communicate it to your advisor or to your faculty member or to your department head so that they are aware and they can follow their proper protocols. A lot of times we keep this to ourselves because we are ashamed, and we don't want to get in trouble, but you're not going to get in trouble if you follow the proper protocols because they're there to protect you.
Yeah, there's a place to be nice and polite and also save your own ego, but this is not the place for that. This is a place to be very radical transparency. I did something really dumb. I didn't realize it was dumb until after, and I got away with it. How can we learn from that? And also, hey, that new student in our lab also did something really dumb, and I need to call them out on that. I need to figure out, did they not know it was wrong, or did they just not care? But, take it seriously so that they don't end up on your memorial wall in
Yes,
the future.
that's right.
So yeah, well, I'll make sure the links to everything we talked about are in the description below. The resources, the database, and the memorial wall. And then as a reminder, if anybody watching has questions they want us to answer in our next video, go ahead and put those in the comments below as well. We might be able to get to a few of them just by replying, but otherwise make sure to subscribe so that when the next video comes out, hopefully your question will be in there. So Stephen, thank you so much for not only for your time today, but also for all the work and dedication that you've put into it to revamp LSI, to really get it out there in ways like this, and also collect all that data so that we can learn even more from it going in the future. And if it hasn't saved any lives already, which I'm pretty sure it has, I'm sure it will over time and very soon. So I can't wait to do this again.
Awesome, Derek. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.